Her name was Hannah. Every single night, before she went to sleep, Hannah Cornish sent her mother 3 words. "Home safe, Mom." That was their deal. Diana Cornish had received that message 412 nights in a row. Through midterms, through heartbreak, through the flu that kept Hannah in her dorm room for 5 days straight. 412 nights. On October 19th, 2024, that message never came. Hannah didn't come home that night. Neither did her 2 closest friends. What happened to them is not a mystery. We know exactly what happened. Their car went off a road, dropped 22 feet into a ravine, and disappeared beneath the trees. Nathan died Sunday evening. Sophie died Monday night. Hannah survived all 78 hours. The mystery is not what killed Nathan and Sophie. The mystery is why they had to die at all. Their car was 3 miles from Flagstaff city limits. 3 miles. Hannah's mother called the police at 7:52 Saturday morning. She called again at 9, at 11, at 2 in the afternoon. On her 4th call in 6 hours, the officer told her, "Ma'am, your daughter is 20 years old. Adults are legally allowed to be unreachable." By the time anyone physically searched for them, Nathan and Sophie had been dead for more than a day. On Sunday afternoon, a full 24 hours before she was found, a government helicopter flew directly over that ravine. Hannah heard it. She screamed until she tasted blood. Nobody was looking for her. The helicopter was traffic patrol. Today, we are going to walk through exactly how a system built to protect people failed 3 young lives so completely that 2 of them never came home. We are going to meet Sergeant Brian Nolan, the man who decided this case was low priority. And we are going to find out how he is still wearing a badge. Flagstaff, Arizona, October 2024. Elevation 7,000 feet. A college town where the October nights are colder than visitors expect, the kind of cold that has teeth by midnight, even when the afternoon felt fine. Hannah Cornish was a sophomore at Northern Arizona University, 20 years old, pre-med, GPA of 3.8. She sat in the front row and meant it. She read ahead. She emailed professors with follow-up questions. She was thorough in a way that quiet people sometimes are, not loudly ambitious, just deeply consistent. The consistency showed up in small ways. She packed her bag the night before. She set 2 alarms. She texted her mother every night. Nathan Avery was 21, civil engineering, junior year. He kept a paperback in his back pocket wherever he went. He had a part-time job at the campus library. He was the designated driver that night, not because anyone asked, because he had already decided. His father, Leonard, 62, retired schoolteacher from Phoenix, had driven 3 hours on Nathan's first move-in day just to check the dorm room door lock. Sophie Wells was 20, hospitality management. She was the kind of warm you notice instantly. She remembered names on first meeting. She remembered birthdays without being reminded. She had texted Hannah about the party, just a small thing at a house near campus, nothing wild. The 3 of them had been close since freshman orientation, dinners on Thursdays, group chats full of grocery lists and half-finished plans, the ordinary, irreplaceable texture of a shared life. On Friday night, October 18th, all 3 went to a house party on Birch Road, 1 mile from campus. 40 people at most. Nathan had coffee and 2 glasses of water. Sophie arrived in a sweater, complaining that Arizona had no right being this cold in October. Hannah texted her mother at 10:14 p.m. "At a party. All good. Text you when I'm home. Home safe, Mom. Later." Diana Cornish read it, smiled, and went to sleep. At 11:48 p.m., the three of them said their goodbyes and got into Nathan's dark green Subaru, heading back to campus, a route Nathan had driven a dozen times. 11 minutes, door to door. They never arrived. What investigators later pieced together, at 12:07 a.m., Nathan's car hit standing water on Route 89A near the Pulliam Airport Junction. The car hydroplaned. Nathan did everything right. It wasn't enough. The outer guardrail at that bend was compromised. 6 weeks earlier, 6 weeks, an Arizona Department of Transportation maintenance worker had filed a report flagging 2 missing anchor bolts at that exact section. Recommended repair? Within 14 days. It was not repaired. The car hit the guardrail at speed. The guardrail gave way. The car dropped 22 feet into the LaRue Wash, a dry creek bed running parallel to the road, invisible beneath juniper and scrub pine. From above, in the dark, in the rain, there was nothing to see. No skid marks visible at speed. No gap you'd catch at 60 miles an hour. The only people who knew where they were them. Diana Cornish woke at 6:45 Saturday morning and reached for her phone before she sat up. No message from Hannah. That had never happened. Not once. Not in 412 nights. She called at 6:52. Voicemail. Waited. Called again. Voicemail. She texted. She called Nathan's number. She'd had it since the time Hannah lost her own phone months before. Straight to voicemail. She called Julia Ross, Sophie's mother. Sophie hadn't come home either. Diana Cornish called the Flagstaff Police Department at 7:52 a.m. The officer who answered, Patrol Officer Eric Dowd, logged the call at 7:54 a.m. He took the names, the ages, the descriptions. He asked about the party. He asked about the route home. Diana told him everything. She told him about the nightly texts. She told him 412 nights without a single miss. Something is wrong, she said. This is not her. Officer Dowd filed his report at 8:02 a.m. Classification: low priority, likely voluntary non-contact. He told Diana to try her daughter's other friends. He said young people sometimes stay at unfamiliar places after parties. He said adults are legally allowed to be unreachable. He did not dispatch a unit to Birch Road. He did not flag the case for the search coordination desk. He did not consult a supervisor. Low priority. Filed. Done. Low priority. 3 people. Missing since midnight. Parents calling before 8 a.m. A nightly text ritual broken for the first time in over a year. Low priority. By 10 a.m. Saturday, all 3 families had found each other. Diana Cornish, Leonard Avery, Julia Ross. 3 parents who had never all spoken before, now connected by a silence they didn't know how to name. Leonard drove to the station at 11:15. He is not a man who raises his voice. He walked to the front desk and asked, with complete composure, to speak to whoever was handling the case. The desk officer pulled up the report, read it, looked up. Says here low priority, likely voluntary. My son has an exam Monday morning, Leonard said. He has never missed a class without notifying his professor in advance. Not once in 3 years. He did not notify anyone. He did not show up. That is not who he is. I am asking you to treat this accordingly. The officer explained that department guidelines required a 24-hour waiting period before escalating adult missing persons cases absent evidence of foul play. 24 hours. Inside the ravine, it had been 11 hours. Nathan Avery was still alive. Diana and Julia arrived by noon. Three parents in a waiting room, being told to wait. Diana had printed a photograph of Hannah, Christmas last year, grinning, hair back. She placed it on the desk without a word. "Just drive the route home from that party," she said. "Once. That's all. Just drive it and look." No unit was dispatched. At 2:30 p.m., the families were directed to the duty supervisor, Sergeant Brian Nolan, 16 years on the force, experienced, composed. He met with the families for 18 minutes. His notes read, "Families present, concern noted, advised standard 24-hour protocol, likely voluntary absence given subject ages and party context, no immediate escalation warranted." What Sergeant Nolan did not tell the families, the department had a specific internal guideline for multiple missing persons from the same incident. That guideline did not require a 24-hour wait. It required immediate coordination with the search desk. It was not followed. Now, here is where it gets interesting. Because Nolan didn't look like a man cutting corners. He looked measured, experienced. His explanation, delivered calmly, made a certain kind of sense. Statistically, young adults reported missing after social events turn up within 48 hours. He'd seen it dozens of times. He sounded reasonable. He was wrong, and we're going to prove it. But I need you to stay with me, because the next detail changes everything about how wrong he was. You now know the case was classified low priority against every instinct those families had. But there's something that happened that same Saturday night, something a stranger noticed from her car that could have ended this in hours. Stay with me. Saturday night, around 9:47 p.m. A woman driving south on Route 89A noticed something in her headlights near the Pulliam Airport bend. A gap in the guardrail. She slowed down, looked, saw nothing obvious in the dark and rain, assumed the rail had always looked like that. She drove on. She is not at fault. She was not trained in crash recognition. She had no idea a missing persons report had been filed that morning. She mentioned it a week later to a coworker after the story broke on the news. But here is what matters. Sunday morning, 8:33 a.m. An Arizona Department of Transportation maintenance worker drove that same stretch of Route 89A on a routine weekend check. He logged 37 observations that morning: potholes, a cracked lane marker, graffiti on a milepost sign. Item 22. Guardrail section 4B, Pulliam bend. Previous damage noted. Gap apparent. Recommend repair within 14 days. 14 days. He did not stop. He did not look into the ravine below. That was not his protocol. His job was to note and report, not to investigate what lay beneath the road surface. His report was filed electronically at 9:12 a.m. Sunday and entered the standard ADOT maintenance queue alongside 47 other flagged items. A missing persons case had been filed with the Flagstaff Police Department. A maintenance report flagging the same bend on the same road had been filed with a state transport agency. 2 institutions, 2 reports, both filed before 10 a.m. Sunday, both pointing at the exact same location. Nobody connected them, because there was no one whose job it was to connect them. No system. No protocol. No alert that linked a flagged guardrail to an active missing persons case. 2 reports. 1 ravine. 3 people. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's a systemic gap, a database problem. That's fixable, but it's not anyone's direct fault. Hold that thought. Because what Sergeant Brian Nolan did on Sunday, with the families standing right in front of him, is a different category of failure entirely. The families were back at the station Sunday morning. They'd been awake all night, They had more information now. A witness who saw the three leave in Nathan's car heading north. They had Nathan's full class schedule showing 3 missed obligations. They had Sophie's work shift she'd never called in to cancel. Think about what that adds up to. 3 adults, same car, same direction. No contact for 30-plus hours. Every single obligation missed with no explanation. No bank activity, no phone pings, no hospital admissions. You're building a picture. And if you were a trained detective looking at that picture, what would you do next? You'd drive the route. You'd put a unit on Route 89A between Birch Road and the university, and you'd drive it slowly. That is the obvious next move. Watch what Sergeant Brian Nolan's Sunday colleague did instead. The Sunday duty supervisor was Sergeant Nathan Chapman. He reviewed the existing case file. He met with the families, and he said, directly, looking Leonard Avery in the eye, "I will personally look into this today. You have my word." His formal note, filed at 2:47 p.m. Sunday, reviewed case file, cross-referenced available GPS data from cell tower pings, phones offline since approximately 0:30 Saturday, no location data available, no evidence of distress, awaiting 48-hour threshold for escalation. Here is precisely what personally looking into it consisted of. Sergeant Chapman opened the case on his computer. He checked whether any of the 3 phones had pinged a cell tower. They hadn't, because all 3 phones were dead or destroyed in the crash. He checked bank card activity. None, because they were in a ravine. He checked hospital admissions. None matching. He did not drive the route. He did not assign a patrol officer to drive the route. He did not contact search and rescue. He did not escalate. He filed a note that said he had personally looked into it, and technically he had. He had looked into 3 computer databases for approximately 20 minutes. The families were not told this. They were told the case was being reviewed. They were told to go home and wait. You have my word. At the inquiry, 11 weeks later, after Nathan and Sophie were already buried, Sergeant Chapman was asked directly, "You told the families you would personally look into the case. Did you conduct any physical investigation?" "I reviewed all available digital resources." "Did you visit the route between the party location and the university campus?" "That was not part of my review at that stage." "Were the families informed that your review was limited to digital sources?" A pause. "No, they were not told that specifically." They were not told that specifically. Inside the ravine, Sunday came and went. Nathan was fading. Hannah kept him talking. She asked about his coursework, about his dad, about his favorite meal. At some point Sunday afternoon, he grabbed her hand and said, "Someone will come. They're looking for us right now." He died Sunday evening. Hannah doesn't know exactly when. She fell asleep from exhaustion, and when she woke, he was gone. She has never spoken publicly about what those first minutes were like. That was the lie that held the case in place for another full day. But there's something that happened Sunday afternoon that no one in that police station knew about. Something Hannah experienced alone at the bottom of that ravine. That will change how you hear everything that comes after. Stay with me. We know what happened inside the ravine because Hannah survived, and because she remembers everything. The car landed on its passenger side. The impact knocked all 3 of them out. Hannah came around first. She estimates 4 or 5 minutes after the crash, though she can't be certain. Time behaves strangely in the dark when you're hurt. The car was tilted. Windshield cracked but intact. Dark in every direction. Cold. 38 degrees and dropping fast at that elevation. Her right collarbone was broken. She knew it immediately, not just from the pain, but from the specific wrongness of how her shoulder sat. 2 ribs on her left side were cracked. Every breath had a sharp edge to it. She cataloged the damage the way a pre-med student would. Methodically, she needed to know what she was working with. Nathan was conscious but couldn't feel his right leg. He had a deep laceration above his left eye. Blood dried dark on his jaw. Sophie was still unconscious against the passenger door, her breathing shallow but present. Hannah tried her phone. Cracked screen. Battery 3%. She typed, "We crashed. Route 89A near airport. Help." She pressed send. 1 bar of signal. The message sat in her outbox, pending, as the battery ticked from 2% to 1 to nothing. She sat in the dark with a dead phone in her hands. She has described that moment, that specific moment, as the one where she made a decision. Not to panic. She had studied enough trauma response to know what panic costs. Calories, warmth, clarity. She couldn't afford any of that. She had a broken collarbone, 2 cracked ribs, no signal, no light, and 2 injured people depending on her to think. So she organized. She covered Sophie with Nathan's jacket. She tore a strip from the hem of her own shirt and pressed it to Nathan's head wound and held it there with her good arm for 11 minutes. She counted. She went through the car the way you'd inventory a supply kit. 1 water bottle, 3/4 full. 1 granola bar, slightly crushed. A packet of mints. And in the driver's door pocket, because Nathan was exactly that kind of person, a compact first aid kit in a red zippered pouch. She rationed the water instantly, small sips, counted intervals between them. She found a pen in the glove box. She pressed it to the back of her left hand and made a mark. Hour 1. She waited for someone to come. She was 20 years old, and she had a broken shoulder and 2 cracked ribs, and she was rationing water, in the dark, at the bottom of a ravine, 3 miles from the city, where people were waking up and making coffee and beginning their Saturday. She waited. Sunday afternoon, roughly 3 p.m., based on the angle of light Hannah could see above the ravine walls. She heard a helicopter, from the south, getting closer. The sound of rotors, that specific, unmistakable thudding beat, approaching over the trees. She pulled herself out of the car, dragged herself into the open stretch of ravine, 20 feet of clear ground before the walls closed in. She grabbed the reflective emergency blanket from Nathan's first aid kit. She waved it. She screamed. She screamed until there was nothing left in her throat, until she could feel blood at the back of it. The helicopter banked and flew away. "I thought they were looking for us," Hannah told investigators 7 days after her rescue. "I thought someone told them where to look. I thought we were about to be found. I kept screaming even after I couldn't hear the rotors anymore, because stopping meant they hadn't seen me. And I couldn't let that be true yet." The helicopter was an Arizona Department of Public Safety Traffic Patrol aircraft, routine weekend survey of highway conditions. It was not assigned to any missing persons search. It had not been informed there was a missing persons search. The pilot was flying a traffic grid. He was doing his job exactly as assigned. Nobody had connected the missing persons case to that road. Nobody had issued an interagency alert. Nobody had told Traffic Aviation to watch Route 89A for anything unusual. The inquiry's aviation consultant later confirmed, based on the logged flight path, that aircraft passed within 400 meters of the crash site at approximately 3:15 p.m. Sunday. If the pilot had been briefed and instructed to check the route visually, The probability of visual identification was assessed as high. He was not briefed. There was no system to brief him. 3 miles from town, a government helicopter, government aircraft, government airspace, directly above her. And still, nobody came. You now know a helicopter flew over Hannah and didn't know she was there. But there's a reason that helicopter was never sent to look for her. And it comes down to a single decision Sergeant Brian Nolan made on Saturday afternoon. A decision that, by Monday morning, had already sealed what was coming. I need to show you exactly how that worked. Monday morning, 48 hours since the crash. The families were back. Leonard had a lawyer with him, not for litigation yet, just someone to help him understand what he was increasingly recognizing as a wall. Diana had a printed timeline. Leonard had Nathan's full semester record, every class, every shift, every obligation missed with no notification. He laid them on the desk, one page at a time. He has never, Leonard said, not once in 3 years missed a class without telling his professor in advance. He is not someone who disappears. I am asking you, again, to drive the route home from that party. 1 car, 1 drive. That is all. The duty officer made a note, said he'd bring it to the senior sergeant. At 2 p.m., they were told an escalation request had been submitted. True, a junior officer had filed it. What the families were not told, in non-urgent classifications, escalation requests were reviewed on a rolling 24-hour basis. The request would be assessed Tuesday morning. Tuesday morning, 72 hours after the crash. Here is what the inquiry found when it looked at the department's own rulebook. The protocol, written, adopted in 2019, sitting in the department's own handbook, specified mandatory multi-agency search activation when 3 or more adults from a shared incident could not be located within 48 hours with no evidence of voluntary contact. The clock started at the point of initial classification. Sergeant Brian Nolan classified the case as likely voluntary on Saturday afternoon. That classification reset the 48-hour clock to 0 and effectively stopped it from ever counting. Because a likely voluntary case is not subject to the mandatory escalation rule, Nolan's Saturday classification, 1 decision, 18 minutes with the families, made every subsequent delay procedurally defensible. The 48-hour rule never triggered because, in the system's eyes, the clock never started. When this was put directly to Sergeant Nolan at the inquiry, your Saturday classification prevented the mandatory protocol from activating. Do you accept that? He said, the classification was based on my professional assessment of the available information at the time. The available information at the time. 3 adults missing simultaneously from the same event, with no contact with family, friends, employers, banks, or hospitals for over 36 hours. A daughter who had texted her mother every single night for over a year. A son who had never missed a class. Professional assessment. We are going to come back to exactly what that assessment cost. But first, I need to take you back into that ravine. Because while Nolan was using those words at a desk in a warm building, Hannah was alone. The water ran out Monday morning. Hannah had rationed it across 2 full days, small sips, timed intervals, never more than she'd calculated was necessary to stay functional. By Monday morning, the bottle was empty. The granola bar had lasted until Sunday night. There was nothing left. Sophie had regained consciousness Sunday morning, confused, frightened, unable to move her left side. Hannah recognized the signs from her coursework. Internal bleeding was likely. She knew the theory. She also knew there was nothing in that ravine that could address it. Sophie asked for her phone. Hannah told her it was gone. Sophie asked for her mother. Hannah held her hand. Sophie died Monday evening, 40 hours after the crash. Hannah was alone. No water, broken collarbone, 2 cracked ribs, no food. The temperature that night dropped to 31 degrees at that elevation. She had a car with no fuel, no heat, an emergency blanket the size of a folded sheet of paper, and a pen she'd been using to track the hours on her hand. She has said, in the only public statement she has ever made, that she made a deliberate decision, clear and specific. She decided that whoever was looking for her would find her in the morning. She had to believe that. And she decided to be alive when they did. She dismantled the car's interior for insulation, floor mats, headrests, the fabric from the rear parcel shelf. She built a barrier around herself in the back seat. She breathed slowly. She stayed out of the wind. She counted. The marks on her hand ran out of space. She started on her wrist. Hour 52, hour 60, hour 70. She survived another night, and another. Sergeant Brian Nolan gave evidence for 3 hours, legal counsel at his side throughout. He was consistent. He had professional judgment. He had statistics on his side. Most young adults reported missing after social events turn up within 48 hours. Resources were stretched. Absent evidence of foul play, voluntary non-contact was the most likely explanation. He sounded, still, like a reasonable man. Then Detective Patterson asked him, if a patrol unit had driven Route 89A on Saturday afternoon, is it possible the crash site would have been identified? Possibly. I cannot say with certainty. Diana Cornish told you her daughter had sent a goodnight text every single night for over a year. Leonard Avery told you his son had never missed a class without notification. In hindsight, does that context change your assessment? In hindsight, yes. There may have been indicators that warranted earlier escalation. There may have been indicators. The medical evidence said this: Nathan Avery's injuries, serious but survivable with prompt intervention. Surgery before Sunday afternoon offered a reasonable probability of survival. He died Sunday evening. Sophie Wells, internal bleeding, serious but not immediately fatal. Survival possible with surgical intervention within 36 hours of injury. She died 40 hours after the crash, without intervention. The inquiry's formal conclusion. The deaths of Nathan Avery and Sophie Wells cannot be definitively attributed solely to institutional failure. However, the inquiry finds that systemic failures materially reduced the probability of timely rescue and may have been a contributing factor in both fatalities. May have been a contributing factor. Let me translate that out of formal language for you. 2 people are dead. A written protocol existed that would have found them sooner. That protocol was not followed. The inquiry cannot say with medical certainty that following it would have saved them, but it also cannot say it wouldn't have. That is what contributing factor means. That is what Sergeant Brian Nolan's professional judgment cost. Now, here is the thing that nobody in that inquiry room could fully answer, the thing that stays. The crash site was not hidden, not really. Not in the way that word implies. The guardrail gap was visible from the road on foot. The tire marks were on the asphalt. The juniper canopy was thick, but the car's roof was dark green, and when the morning light hit it at the right angle. Think about what that means. 78 hours. Dawn came 4 times over that ravine. 4 mornings. 4 sets of changing light coming through those trees. And the question that Leonard Avery could not stop asking, the question he put to the inquiry, to the lawyers, to anyone who would sit still long enough, was this: if one person had driven that road, just one, on Saturday, on Sunday, on Monday morning, would they have seen it? The inquiry's answer, in its own careful language: a patrol unit driving Route 89A at any point between Saturday morning and Tuesday evening would have had a high probability of identifying the crash site based on the visible guardrail damage and tire marks present at the scene. High probability. The crash site was found on Wednesday morning, not by a patrol unit, not by a search helicopter, not by any arm of any institution that had been notified 3 days earlier that 3 people were missing. It was found by 2 retired people on a morning walk. And here is how it happened. Wednesday, October 23rd, 7:14 a.m. A retired couple from Flagstaff, out for their regular morning walk along the Pulliam Airport access track, noticed the guardrail gap on Route 89A. They were on foot. They stopped. One of them leaned over the edge. She saw the car, dark green roof, catching the first of the morning light through the juniper canopy. She screamed for her husband. He called 911. First responders reached the scene at 7:41 a.m. They rappelled into the ravine. The first paramedic found Nathan in the rear seat, found Sophie in the passenger seat. The third paramedic found Hannah. She was conscious, wrapped in floor mats and a crumpled reflective blanket, lips cracked white, eyes open and tracking. 78 marks on the back of her hand and up her wrist, ink faded, some marks blurred with sweat and cold, but countable. She said, "I knew you'd come. I kept telling myself you'd come." Then, "Why did it take so long? We heard helicopters. We were right here." The paramedic has said she held Hannah's hand and told her she was safe. She did not tell Hannah that nobody had been searching that road. She didn't have the words for it. Nobody did. Hannah was airlifted to Flagstaff Medical Center. Severe dehydration, hypothermia, fractured collarbone, 2 cracked ribs, malnourished. Alive. Nathan Avery was 21 years old. Sophie Wells was 20 years old. Both are gone. Leonard Avery received his call at 8:06 a.m. He had been at the station every day since Saturday. He had stopped sleeping. He had been compiling a list. Quiet, careful, the way a school teacher compiles a list, of every decision that had been made and when. He was told Nathan had been found. He was told Nathan had not survived. 12 seconds of silence. The officer on the phone has described them. Then Leonard said, "Did you search that road?" The officer didn't understand. Route 89A, the road from the party. Did anyone drive that road on Saturday? The officer checked the file. No record of a route search. Another silence. "He could have been alive on Saturday, when you told me to wait." Then Leonard hung up. The formal inquiry opened within 72 hours of the rescue, led by Detective Sarah Patterson, an investigative supervisor from the Coconino County Sheriff's Office, brought in specifically because of her independence from the Flagstaff PD chain of command. 11 weeks. Every log, every note, every call record, every dispatch timestamp. 15 officers interviewed, 4 supervisors, the ADOT maintenance worker, the helicopter pilot, the paramedics, the families, and Hannah herself. The findings, delivered in the flat, careful language of formal inquiry, were devastating. The initial classification was wrong. Officer Dowd's low-priority call was made within minutes, with no investigation, no cross-referencing of multiple missing persons from the same event, and no supervisor consultation. The department's own guidelines required automatic supervisor review for 3 or more adults missing simultaneously from the same incident. This step did not happen. The 48-hour mandatory search protocol was never triggered. The written protocol, adopted 2019, sitting in the department handbook, required mandatory multi-agency search activation after 48 hours of unresolved multiple adult disappearance. Because Sergeant Nolan's Saturday classification labeled it voluntary, the 48-hour clock never started. Nolan had full authority to override this when the families appeared in person. He chose not to. Sergeant Chapman's Sunday review was a screen check, nothing more. Despite telling the families he would personally look into the case, Chapman's review consisted entirely of database queries. No physical investigation, no route check. The inquiry found that a patrol unit driving Route 89A at any point between Saturday morning and Tuesday evening would have had, in the inquiry's own words, a high probability of identifying the crash site. The guardrail damage and tire marks were confirmed still visible when first responders arrived Wednesday. The ADOT maintenance report and the missing persons case were never linked. 2 institutions, 2 reports, the same location, filed within hours of each other on Sunday morning. No interagency alert system existed to connect them. The inquiry called this a critical systemic gap. The Sunday helicopter could have found her. The aircraft passed within 400 meters of the crash site at approximately 3:15 p.m. Sunday. If the pilot had been briefed and instructed to check Route 89A visually, probability of identification high. He was not briefed. No alert had been issued. I planted something early in this story, and I need to come back to it now. The guardrail. 6 weeks before the crash. 6 weeks. An ADIT maintenance worker filed a report flagging 2 missing anchor bolts at guardrail section 4B on the Pulliam bend of Route 89A. He classified the repair as non-urgent, recommended completion within 14 days. It was not completed. The Avery family commissioned an independent structural review after the inquiry. The finding was unambiguous. With both anchor bolts in place, the guardrail at that section would not have failed under the impact of Nathan's car. The energy dispersal math is clear. With original hardware, the car deflects. It does not go over the edge. 2 bolts, reported, logged, classified non-urgent, not fixed. There were 53 days between that maintenance report and the night of October 19th. 53 days in which anyone could have driven to that bend with 2 bolts and a wrench. Nobody did. The ADIT has not publicly commented on the maintenance timeline. Leonard Avery's civil lawsuit names both the City of Flagstaff and the State of Arizona as defendants. 2 missing bolts, a guardrail that gave way, a classification of low priority, a protocol not followed, a helicopter not briefed, a screen checked instead of a road driven. 6 failures, 3 miles, 2 people who did not come home. The full inquiry report was published in January 2025. 112 pages. It recommended mandatory supervisor review for all multiple adult missing persons cases regardless of initial classification. An immediate cross-agency alert protocol linking ADIT road damage reports to PD missing persons cases. A 14-point revision to classification guidelines. and the opening of disciplinary proceedings against Sergeant Brian Nolan and Sergeant Nathan Chapman. Sergeant Brian Nolan remains on the force. Administrative duties. Disciplinary process ongoing. Sergeant Chapman received a formal reprimand. Still on the force. Officer Dowd, the first officer, the 7:54 a.m. call, was found to have acted within the existing, flawed protocol. No disciplinary action. The inquiry's finding: the systemic gap meant individual officers weren't equipped to make the call that should have been built into the system. He is still on the force. The cross-agency alert protocol linking ADOT road damage reports to active missing persons cases was implemented in Coconino County in February 2025. That protocol did not exist when Hannah Cornish pressed send on a 3% battery and watched the message sit unsent in her outbox. It exists now. For the next family. Diana Cornish has made one public statement since the inquiry. She delivered it without visible anger. That absence of anger, that deliberate, controlled restraint, is somehow the hardest part to sit with. They had a protocol. The rule said if 3 people are missing from the same event, a supervisor reviews it immediately. No waiting, no judgment call. The rule was written down. It was already there. It was there on Saturday morning when I called for the 4th time. It was there when Leonard stood at the desk and said his son had never missed a class. Hannah is alive. I hold on to that. But I need someone to say out loud that it was not supposed to be this way, that there was a way to prevent it, that the way existed, that someone chose not to use it. Hannah Cornish was discharged from Flagstaff Medical Center on October 29th, 6 days after she was found. She had lost 18 pounds. She had surgery on her collarbone, months of physical therapy ahead. She took a medical leave from NAU, went home to Phoenix, slept. In March 2025, she published a statement. It reads the way a pre-med student would write. No extra words, no theater, just clarity. I survived because I refused to stop counting. I counted the hours. I counted my breaths. I counted the times I heard traffic overhead. 12 times, 12 passes. Counting meant staying present. It meant there was still something to count toward. I want to finish my degree. I want to become a doctor. And I want the first thing I learn, the first protocol I internalize, to be that the protocol exists for a reason. The rule is not bureaucracy. The rule is the thing that saves people. Someone forgot that. I am asking every person in a position where the rule feels inconvenient, where the judgment call seems easier. Please remember. She is enrolled in the spring semester. She still texts her mother every night. Here is what I want you to take from this. Not anger. Anger fades. I want something more durable than anger. I want you to take the knowledge that systems fail when individuals decide the rule is optional, when the protocol feels like a formality, when professional judgment replaces written procedure. The 48-hour escalation rule was written down. The mandatory supervisor review was written down. The procedure for multiple missing adults from the same incident was written down. None of it was invented after the fact. It was there on Saturday. It was there when Diana Cornish called for the 4th time in 6 hours, when Leonard Avery said, "My son does not disappear." The rule was there. Sergeant Brian Nolan decided it didn't apply. And if you are in any position at all, where the rule feels inconvenient, where the judgment call seems faster, where following the procedure feels like unnecessary effort, I am asking you to remember Nathan Avery. Remember Sophie Wells. Remember Hannah Cornish at the bottom of a ravine, counting marks on her wrist, listening to helicopters that didn't know she was there, screaming into the dark at aircraft that were doing traffic surveys 3 miles from town. She was worth finding on Saturday. They all were. If this story mattered to you, subscribe. There are more stories like this one, and I'm not done telling them. Before you go, one last image. Hannah Cornish is back at university this semester. She is in class. She is reading ahead. She is sitting in the front row. And every night, without exception, she sends her mother 3 words. Home safe, Mom. 413 nights, and counting.